What I would like to know is an answer to a very simple question. Are we alone as conscious beings in this entire buzzing 400 billion star galaxy, one of 10 to the 10th other galaxies? It seems pretty implausible.
For the first time, we're mustering substantial, sophisticated, serious scientific searches for extraterrestrial intelligence. There's never been a time like that before. So there is some chance that in the next few decades we will get a signal from some spectacularly distant, spectacularly exotic civilization, and everything on Earth will, as a consequence, change. I think even if there's a plausible argument for a few, we ought to keep looking. I'd even go further than that. If there's a plausible argument that there isn't anybody out there, bearing in mind that we can be wrong, we ought to keep looking, because the question is of the most supreme importance. It calibrates our place in the universe. It tells us who we are. And so it is worthwhile trying to find other civilizations, I would say, no matter what.
That I think this enterprise can best be understood as a kind of exercise in the archaeology of the future. We're well aware of the archaeology of the past. We find a site, a tumulus or a ruin, and we take a spade and we dig into the ground, and if you're lucky, you discover Ur of the Chaldees or something marvelous. Now, we never thought that we could examine the same thing in reverse time, but in fact, in a way, we can. We know that it's possible that somebody who wants to do it will bring us in. Of course, it is their past, but our future, which we're investigating to some degree. Even though they're made of different chemistry, even though they've never seen our star, even though they have nothing biological in common with us, they have, if they have got radio astronomy, if they have the kind of technology we're imagining, have very much in common with us the manufacture of a culture, the development of a culture which is unmatched in all the 10 billion species or more that have come to the face of the Earth. So that's the story, and maybe the spade will turn up, luckily, a good site one day. We hope it will. It's just a question of being patient. When you got the spade and you know the future is there, it seems very wrong not to dig.
It seems possible that the Earth has been visited by various galactic civilizations many times, possibly every 10,000 years during geological time. It is not out of the question that artifacts of these visits still exist, or even that some type of faith is maintained in the solar system to provide continuity for successive expeditions. Because of the weathering and possibility of detection and interference by inhabitants of Earth, it might be preferable not to erect such a base on the Earth's surface. Intelligent Life in the Universe, written by Dr. Carl Sagan and I.S. Skolowski. Interesting comments coming from scientists. SETI, now called Project Phoenix, CSETI, and a disclosure project. Many other organizations and individuals are seeking signs of extraterrestrial life. Well, what kind of evidence should we be looking for? Dr. Alan Tuff, a leading SETI proponent, wrote a research paper entitled How to Achieve Contact, 5 Promising Strategies. And he said the scientific search for extraterrestrial intelligence, SETI, is expanding its array of search strategies. This is highly appropriate change. He lists 5. 1. Pursue a variety of means for searching the solar system and Earth for physical evidence of an alien object or its effects. 2. Issue invitations asking ETI to have a dialogue with humankind. 3. Become sufficiently prepared for contact, thus encouraging ETI to respond. And for evidence from many light years away, search for astro-engineering projects and their byproducts, or of course, radio and optical SETI. And he devotes this paper to the 5 promising strategies. We're going to zero in on several of those. The SETI field is united by its common aim of detecting irrefutable scientific evidence of genuine extraterrestrial intelligence. Search for an alien object. Strategy 1. Search the solar system and Earth for physical evidence of an alien object or its effects. A search for physical evidence could focus on the solar system or on Earth. It could focus on phenomena that are normally studied by mainstream science or on stranger anomalous phenomena. These two distinctions enable us to cluster the various search approaches into 4 categories. It lists within the solar system, search for unassailable evidence of an alien object. We're going to focus in on that because that is probably the most likely place in view of our technology that we'd find something. Alternatively, the alien object might be a building, a monument, or some other artificial structure. Indeed, an alien intelligence may have deliberately left an artifact for us to discover at some special landmark in the solar system, such as the highest point on Mars, or the deepest canyon on Venus, or in some carefully chosen spot that we will explore someday because of our scientific curiosity or our appreciation of beauty. An alien object might be a building, a monument, or some other artificial structure. Research Methodologies on Contact with ETI, written by Dr. John B. Alexander of the National Institute for Discovery Science. Serious business, contacting ETI. A lot of money, a lot of time is going into it. A space exploration device from Earth sends back a report of evidence of prior life with demonstrated intellect from a planet or moon. A very, very interesting comment. The finding of ancient ruins or artifacts on another planet or the moon would be the most likely discovery because of our technological level. It is the opinion of most SETI scientists that any contact would be made with a very old and highly technological society. Interesting to repeat it. Very old, but highly technological. If they are old or ancient, they could well have been in our solar system long before mankind even existed, and therefore ancient ruins or artifacts would be eventually discovered as we explore the other planets of our solar system. Scientists agree that Mars at one time probably had water and an atmosphere much like Earth. If this is true, then an alien culture could have set up a base on Mars for exploration and left it after their explorations were completed. The first discovery of these ruins or artifacts would then be by satellite probes of Mars, and their initial discovery would be very controversial. Hence the much argued dispute over the face on Mars and other recently presented findings of anomalies on the surface. The Brookings report said that one of the groups of mankind that would feel most threatened by the discovery of extraterrestrial artifacts would be the scientists and engineers. Hence, they would be also the most likely to mock and ridicule any such discoveries. They would then not just be skeptics, using so-called scientific reasons for rejection. They would, because of this innate fear, go to the extreme of unbelief and denial, even when presented with basically irrefutable evidence. We have already seen this in action from the scientific community. This ridicule, mocking, and denial and unbelief would be presented to the general public as scientific facts, when the real foundations for rejection were not scientific at all, but would be presented that way to cover the underlying fear. The same rejection on scientific grounds is found when ancient manuscripts which speak of visitations from the stars are rejected as absurd myths, simply because it does not interface with presently accepted norms and interpretations of our past. And that's a very important point. This basic fear that we may not be on top of the food chain in the universe underlies the general public's attitude towards UFOs, the concept of aliens and earthly visitations by them. This manifests itself as the giggle factor, or the mocking of people who claim to have been abducted or had any sightings. Because of this fear, actual advances in the research or discovery of ancient artifacts and ruins on other planets will be most assuredly be met with extreme controversy and rejection. Governments then might consider they had a valid reason for total cover-up if they discovered artifacts per the Brookings report. The Brookings Institute being a think tank and issued a report many, many years ago. The religious community was also singled out by the Brookings report as another group very likely to be upset over the discovery of ruins or artifacts that would prove the existence of alien life forms and intelligence. Thus, there are powerful social and political forces at work, both in the public and governments, to refute any evidence presented or attempt at least to cover it up, sweep it under the rug, so to speak. This is especially true in media, which has ridiculed, mocked, and attempted to destroy any evidence brought forth by independent sources such as Richard Hoagland, Stephen Greer, and others by only reporting on those issues brought forth by NASA, JPL, or Mail and Space Services, or the official politically correct position of accepted science. And that's a kind of an interesting thing. The Discovery Channel recently ran a documentary called Ocean Mysteries: Fury in the Abyss.
Earth might be like Mars, a planet that is believed to have had massive seas hundreds of millions of years ago. At the University of Arizona Lunar and Planetary Laboratory, Professor Victor Baker thinks Mars may have looked like this, very similar to Earth today, with a warm climate, abundant carbon dioxide, and probably life forms.
Now, there's evidence in the northern plains for ponded water. The low parts have what appear to be sedimentary materials. There appear to be shorelines around the margin. All of those are consistent with the idea that this was covered with a body of water.
What happened? The answer lies with carbon dioxide, this white substance you see floating in the ocean. Carbon dioxide from the atmosphere dissolves easily in water. There it undergoes chemical reactions that turn it into sediment that collects at the bottom of the sea. For life to flourish, the carbon dioxide needs to be recycled back into the atmosphere. Earth has a mechanism to do that. Undersea volcanoes. Along with the lava, they spew forth volcanic gas, including carbon dioxide from the Earth's core. Dr. Christopher McKay of the NASA Ames Research Center.
Well, on Earth, that carbonate will be recycled by plate tectonics carrying the material down deep under the Earth, where at high temperatures, the carbonate will turn back into carbon dioxide and come bubbling up through volcanoes. That recycling is a very important part of keeping Earth healthy. Without that recycling, Earth would not be habitable.
Those plate tectonics don't occur on Mars. There's no chain of volcanic mountain ranges like on Earth. On Mars, the atmospheric carbon dioxide decreased, reducing what we call the greenhouse effect, and the temperature dropped rapidly. The seas froze, and with water evaporation reduced, rainfall decreased. Seawater eventually seeped into the ground, finally froze, and got trapped underneath. Mars transformed into a cold, bleak planet.
If Mars was at one time a planet with water and warm temperatures, then there is every reason to believe that if Earth was in fact visited by aliens, as ancient manuscripts claim, then Mars could be visited as well, and evidence of those visits might well be found as ancient, intelligently designed structures. As most scientists agree that such a civilization would be highly advanced in both social structure and technology, we might also find evidence of such advanced technology as portrayed in Total Recall: Forbidden Planet or Mission to Mars.
Don't you think whoever built this thing thought of that?
Who knows what the hell they thought? They weren't human.
Maybe it's a trap. Maybe they want a meltdown.
We don't even know if this piece of junk will work. What is it? A million? Half a million?
Not 500,000.
500,000 years old. Well, let's make sure quantum...
technicians have ridden in this little vehicle. But now, Dr. Moebius, prepare your minds for a new scale of physical scientific values, gentlemen.
There's not an earthquake, Ruby.
Dear God, what is it?
It's fantastic.
And TASS confirms reports that similar gigantic craft are now approaching Moscow, Leningrad, and Vladivostok. This would bring the unofficial count to at least 31.
How can it just hang there?
3 miles.
Cairo also is reporting that its UFO is stationary now, like almost all the others, hanging in the
I still think we should leave the city.
No, the roads are... Look. Is that what I think it is?
Yeah. It's Mars.
Hollywood imagination may be one thing, but the concepts presented agree with SETI scientists in their basic foundations. If contact is ever made, the aliens will be far more advanced than human civilization. Signs of artificial intelligence, this means forced, determined, or planned construction rather than natural, random, or accidentally produced shapes. Very, very important that we cover some of these signs. What do we look for when looking for signs of artificial structures or intelligently designed structures? What characteristics do they display that natural organic objects do not? What makes them different? We just don't think about it here on Earth. We're so used to seeing buildings and roadways. Natural objects such as rocks, hills, mountains, lakes, rivers, and streams have a meandering appearance to them following natural forces, taking the path of least resistance. Thus, we do not see natural objects with repeated squares, triangles, circles, ovals, domes, centered objects, and other perfect geometric shapes. You simply just don't see them in nature on repeated patterns. Intelligently designed structures have engineered shapes to them, with lines that delineate repeated angles for walls, roofs, doorways, archways, foundations, and support with roadways for access. There is, therefore, obvious planning when you view a city, a town, or a building from aloft. Their duplicated hard forms differ from the random, natural surroundings. Now in this view, we're going to come in. You can't see anything as you come into planet Earth. What we're going to zero in on is Manhattan, and until you get very, very close, you see no signs of any artificial intelligence. But the minute you start closing in, all of a sudden the patterns begin to appear. Buildings, roadways, squares. You even have domes, arches, repeated patterns. Very, very obvious to us. The thing is, we just don't normally think about it, but that is how you determine artificial intelligence. Buildings of artificiality. They stand out like a sore thumb once you think about what it is you're looking at. But you can see the repeated angles, the square 90-degree corners, flat roofs and flat walls, etc., etc. Image context. What is the actual image context? Well, the location of Tithonia is latitude minus 4.96 south, longitude 89.62 west. It's just south of the Martian equator in the Tithonium Chasma floor area. We've got it marked as a bullseye there on Mars. As we zero in, it sits very low. And there's a very good reason probably why they picked that spot. It would be out of the way of more lethal rays from the sun. It probably had water on it at one time. It certainly looks like an inland lake was there, and that this community sits on a small island, small rise. It's an incredible, incredible colony of structures. The colony is located about 6 miles south of the center point location of the MOC 0204304 strip. It is about 2,300 feet below the surrounding Martian terrain insofar as we have been able to determine. We're not absolutely sure about the actual depth of it, but it's far, far below the surrounding territory because it lies within the chasm itself. This colony has a tremendous amount of artificial structures. They are located in about an 82-acre area. For the southern colony, there are actually 2 colonies at this location. One is about a half a mile to the north. There are all types of structures here, from hexagons to very high-tech modern arches to wall ruins, step pyramids, roadways. There appear to be tunnels. There are fairly modern buildings as well as very, very ancient walled ruins that appear to be in a very, very old state of disrepair and ruin. There are step pyramids, as you find in Mexico and South America, but there are also Egyptian-style shapes that appear quite frequently. There's domed structures that appear to be like communications dome structures. It's an incredible array and a sort of an admixture of different civilizations: Egyptian, Mexican, South American, Indian, Middle Eastern architecture all play in these shapes. Some of these shapes are very, very easily discerned. Others are quite difficult to actually pick out, but once you see them, they snap out at you very readily. It's just a tremendous archaeological site. There is a 200-foot tall statue there. Has folded arms. It's coming into view now, and it's very, very much like you find in Egypt with the folded arms, feet together, like the mummy statues that you find in Egyptian culture. The first building we're going to actually look at is, we dubbed it the mining or the manufacturing plant, for lack of a better word for it. It appears to be more along those lines than anything else, but you can see it. It sits on the furthest west side of Tithonia City. You can see the ink lift coming in there to show you exactly where it is and the outline of it. And as you close in on it, it becomes more and more obvious that this has all the parameters of an artificially designed building, parallel lines that form rectangles and virtual squares. There are several flying buttresses on this building to hold up that long protrusion you see in front. You notice that the protrusion is part of the overall structure. This is an incredible building to be finding on the planet Mars. Here's an ink lift that we did of it. We were very, very careful when we traced these to trace them to exact scale as we found them on the drawing. It's about 325 feet long with the protrusion. It's about 150 feet high, 100 feet wide. The protrusion itself on front is about 75 feet tall. Here's an artist rendition of it. You'll notice that to the left of the building there appear to be what is called, almost looks like strip mining. And then the terracing is abruptly terminated by this structure. It's just an incredible structure. And no other terminology can describe it. We don't really know what it is or what it's for, but it is clearly visible. We have it portrayed as the item on top, you will notice, is dead center. We're going to reverse things and go back down, and as you see it the second time around, take a look at the structure on top of the roof of this building, and you'll see it's located in the exact center. Nature does not provide us with 90-degree corners, flat walls, flat roofs, centered objects on the roofs. Does not provide us with flying buttresses and tunnels between them or in them for pathways to go through, as can be readily seen in the pictures. You actually have to obtain the photographs themselves and really study them to get the full impact of what it is you're seeing. But this is a very, very large structure. And because there is a large tunnel behind it, we're very, very curious if this could not have been some sort of a mining facility or a manufacturing facility or of some type. And I guess there's no way to know unless you go there. But now I want you to focus not so much on the building this time around, but on the land, the natural flow of land to the left of this structure. As we back away from it, you can see the terracing much more readily, and you will notice that this building just abruptly terminates that natural flow of the land. It has been carved right into the hill to the left of it. The pathway, as you can see, goes around the building and then continues on out of the picture. There is every evidence of artificiality. This large structure fulfills every parameter used to identify artificiality or intelligent design. 1, a rectangular shape repeated in a large protrusion, except it's smaller and longer. 2, repeated flat walls. 3, repeated 90-degree angle sharp corners. 4, a flat roof with a rounded cap structure that sits in the exact center of the roof. 5, a large pathway roadway that leads up to and goes into the flying buttresses and around the structure itself. 6, large openings where one would expect to see large doors, windows, or even solar collectors. 7, this structure is totally anomalous to the immediate terrain and in fact abruptly terminates the flow of the terrain as engineering would require. And that's one of the key signatures of artificiality. 8, the presence of buttresses supports is not something natural, but is something only engineers would accomplish. These are facts that are beyond dispute. Any attempt to claim this structure is just a rock or a natural formation of some type would be an absurd beyond comprehension. Conclusion: structure number 1 is intelligently designed for purposes unknown by entities unknown. The suggestion of a mining operation or manufacturing plant is conjecture only, based upon Earth structures. The next thing we're going to look at is a shrine or observatory. We believe that it is most likely a shrine, not an observatory. We took the liberties of putting a statue in there, reminiscent of Greek culture and ancient cultures that used to put in large statues in their large buildings. But here it sits, again, to the west we're looking north in these pictures. And here you see this hexagon structure snuggled right up next to what we dubbed the mining building. You can see the ink lift coming in there. And as we close in on it, it becomes very, very obvious that we are looking at a hexagon structure. You can see a stairway going right up the center. There's an arched dome that accepts the stairway, and it has an inverted V entrance into it. This is an amazing structure. Here's a close-up of it, and you can see the roadway going in to all the openings. There's 2, and then the stairway. There's 2 frontal openings, and then there's the stairway, and you can see the roadway, pathway, whatever you want to call it, leads into every single one of those areas. Here's an ink lift taken direct from the picture, and we've simply closed in on it as much as possible to give you a much better idea of what it actually does look like. We feel that rather than communications or a astronomical observatory, that this is most likely a religious shrine. It's 170 feet tall by about 150 feet wide. The arched dome on top is about 95 feet high and 95 feet wide. The architecture is reminiscent of Indian and Middle Eastern architecture, and yet totally different in other respects. The closest building we could actually find would be the Dome of the Rock, and it's far, far different than that even. It's an enigma. There is no question that it is difficult to determine exactly what this building was used for or is being used for. If anybody's there now, it doesn't look like anybody is. That doesn't mean there isn't. In these computer animations, we took the liberty of putting the statue in there to show you what it would look like if there were a gigantic golden image statue put inside the worship of a deity, possibly the Ra or Ray, as some people call him. We're not sure. There is absolutely no way to know with any certainty precisely the function of this structure. We do have a reason, though, why we think this is much more likely a religious shrine rather than a communication structure or an observatory. It's based upon location and other artifacts that are close at hand. Right behind this structure lies a 200-foot tall statue. It's an incredible, incredible statue. This building itself is an incredible building when you stop and think about where it's located. Who built it? Why did they build it? What is this hexagon structure doing on Mars with an arched dome that's 95 feet tall? These are very serious questions, and it raises serious questions about our own ancient past, because the scale of these buildings is in reality very, very close to Earth structures. We do have to start asking some questions here. Who taught mankind, for example, how to build religious shrines, step pyramids, Egyptian pyramids? Did we just conjure it up on our own? Or was there somebody here to help us do that, to put the concept into our minds? Where did we get the concept of building, like the Taliban blew up the Buddha in Afghanistan, and that Buddha is about 180 feet tall. Well, who put it in the minds to build statues of their deities? So you have to ask a lot of these questions, but we feel that because of its location, it's beside a steep cliff, there's a big building right next to it. It would be in the wrong position to be an astronomical observatory. It also would not be conducive to communications. You would want something more open and higher in elevation than what this building is. And the presence of the statue immediately behind it, you can see it even now. If you look, it's this long, elongated thing with folded arms, just like you find in Egypt, sitting or standing rather behind this shrine or this observatory, whatever it is. The fascinating thing is the roadways that, or pathways that lead directly into it. All of these things prove the concept of artificiality, intelligent design. There is no way that this building is a natural anomaly, just a pile of rocks that happens to look like a building. This is a building. We compared it to Earth structures. The first things we looked at were communications buildings. And almost all the communications buildings that you find on Earth have domes on top of them, or they're large, large dishes for antennas. And many of them, of course, put domes over the antennas to protect them. But basically, they all look like domes. And although this has sort of a dome on top of it, it's an arched dome, not like observatories either. The observatories that we could find do not look anything like this. There is an observatory at this colony, we're quite certain. One of the buildings is, in reality, a large observatory. It's in the correct position. It's very high up, and we just feel that the chances are that it really is an observatory. Here you see some of them, but again, the building we looked at is totally different. The placement of this structure at a low point with its back next to a high cliff and a large wall on the right because of the building it is next to all seem to preclude the concept that this is an observatory or communications building of some type. And that's a very, very important point when you're trying to determine what the structure could be. The dome is an arch, not a circular dome. The opening is an inverted V shape, not the rectangle observed on all earthbound observatories when they open their windows to observe the night sky. This is a clearly defined set of steps in the center of this structure leading up to the open archway. This suggests a form of step pyramid with an unusual arched dome on the top, suggesting a religious shrine. The shape of this structure is a clearly defined hexagon with the dome perfectly centered on a flat roof. The two sides of the lower foundation, separated by the steps, are perfectly equal. All corners are precise, and the walls perfectly flat. Nature does not provide this type of anomalies. This is an engineered structure built by intelligence for a specific reason. The pathways lead directly to both sides of the lower foundational structure entrances, as well as directly to the steps. The architecture of this structure follows that of the Middle East and India, with the Dome of the Rock a clear example, but with obvious major differences. These facts combined lead us to conclude that this is an ancient religious shrine of some sort. Our placing of a replica of the statue behind this structure into the dome is conjecture, but is based upon ancient concepts, such as found in Greece, Egypt, and elsewhere. The presence of a large statue with a step pyramid next to it in the immediate vicinity suggest a deeply rooted religious society, the same as found in ancient Mexico, South America, and Egypt. There is an entire pyramid complex within the main city walls, which will be explored in Volume 2 of Project Redstar. There is a larger shrine in the northern colony about 1/2 mile away. It is identical to this one in all aspects, except it is larger, by perhaps 1/3 or even a half, actually. Does nature provide us with duplicate hexagons, perfectly centered domes, stairways, foundations, flat roofs, and flat walls? As we have said previously, you might be able to claim one structure a natural accident, one of nature's clever tricks, but 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or even more? Anyone who even suggests that these structures are natural anomalies is simply in deep denial and total unbelief. You could say, well, the computer misreads what it's finding, but not with that many buildings. We have not even begun to examine the multitude of artificial structures in the site. In Part 2, after intermission, we will examine the northern shrine, the large statue, ancient wall ruins, a large step pyramid, and several of the strangest high-tech structures you will ever see. Who built them? Next thing we're going to look at here is the northern colony. There is a shrine up there, and we call it shrine number 2. There are therefore 2 shrines, or whatever they are, at this site within a 1/2 mile of each other. Shrine number 2 in the northern colony is half again possibly as large as the first shrine by the statue. There is no statue apparently by this secondary shrine, but the second shrine, you can see it now coming in with the ink lift, and it is a hexagon. It has a stairway going right up the center. It has the 2 equal parts. There is a ball-like communications structure in front of this shrine, it appears, but to show it more clearly, we simply took that out of it. But you can clearly see the hexagon shape. You can see the dome in the middle of it. And if you examine it very, very closely, you'll find that there appear to be 2 openings on each side of the inverted V entrance to this dome. And that's about the only difference. It's a little larger. The dome appears just a little bit lower, but for all practical purposes, we can classify them as almost identical in shape, and therefore most likely in usage. We're not exactly sure, of course, what the use is. We feel that the evidence is overwhelming that these are religious shrines of some sort. This dome is 225 feet wide. It's 180 feet tall. The dome on top is 120 feet. And we have, again, put a statue in this one as well, just to show it as a religious shrine. It may have a totally different function to it. However, the overall concept of this facility, this colony, appears to be deeply embedded in a religious ritual, as are some of the colonies in Mexico and South America. Play a deeply religious role in the community. Here we have a comparison of the 2 shrines. We exaggerated the second shrine just a little bit more to show you the key differences between them. They're almost identical, however, in their basic engineering structure. Actually, this is quite incredible, because to find 2 structures of this type within 1/2 mile of each other, each having engineered structures beside or in close proximity to them, is quite astounding when you stop and think about it. And further, gives you almost absolute proof of intelligent design. 1, notice each arched dome has a centered inverted V entrance. 2, each has a stairway leading right up the center of the entire structure. 3, the foundations are identical, just different in size. 4, they are located about 1/2 mile apart, separated by natural rolling terrain. 5, the foundations form parallel lines from the top of the roof structure and the bottom. 6, the arched domes sit in the center of the roofs of the foundations. The domes are equal in curvature on both left and right sides. The front of the foundational structures have clear 90-degree corners and flat walls and flat roofs. All of these are proof of intelligent design. Nature does not provide us with such exact engineering details. These structures are clearly intelligently designed for purposes unknown by entities unknown. And in this video production, we make no attempt to say or attempt to prove out in any way, shape, or manner who these entities are. There are clues as to who they are, but that's a totally different concept. And as you back away, you see a few more details of this structure. And incredible is about all one can say. It does not match India or Middle Eastern structures, but it comes closer to those than anything else that we have on planet Earth. And again, we say the fact that there are two of them within a 1/2 mile of each other is fairly conclusive, and we would say absolutely conclusive, of the facts of artificiality or intelligent design. I don't see how anyone could actually rationally try to claim that these are just anomalies and rock piles, and it's just simply light and shadow that's playing all these tricks, and there is absolutely nothing here whatsoever. And the other thing that makes us think that these are shrines is the presence of the large statue, again sitting to the west of the Tithonia city and overlooking the city. Actually, this very large statue is very, very clear, typical of Egyptian style, arms folded, legs together, feet protruding. It appears to have headdress of royalty when you examine it very closely. You probably cannot see that on the TV screen at all, but the head has two shadows going down each side, which are very symbolic of the flat headdress of the Egyptians. You can see how the arms are folded, which thrusts the chest out, and it thrusts the shoulders out. And I suppose some people might say, well, that's just a rock pile, and you're just reading something into it. Well, unfortunately, rock piles don't form that way. A rock pile, if it was a rock pile, would be wide at the bottom and narrow at the top because of the forces of gravity. This is almost just the opposite. This is clearly an engineered, carved statue. The question is, what is a statue about 175 feet to 200 feet tall doing on the planet Mars? Who put it there? As we have said, the scale of the statue is about 175 feet. It could be over 200 feet tall. It's kind of hard to measure. The statue, number one, we're looking down at it from about a 42-degree angle. And number two, the statue appears to be leaning up against a cliff wall behind it, a solid rock foundation, which probably anchors this statue. It may have even fallen backwards on it at some time, maybe in the high winds of Mars. We're not sure. It definitely appears to be leaning backwards against the rock cliff that it has behind it. And we compared this to the Buddha found in Afghanistan that the Taliban blew up. That Buddha was about 180 feet tall. The comparison, the Buddha's head is 34 feet high, the head of the Martian statue 38 feet, the head of the Buddha is 29 wide, the head of the Martian statue is 37 feet, and the width at the shoulder is 60 feet, width of the shoulder of the Martian statue 75 feet, waist width 41, waist width 50 on Mars, leg length 80 feet on the Buddha, 75 feet. I mean, everything that you see compares properly in proportion to a humanoid statue. So again, we have to ask the question, not only what is a statue doing on Mars, what is a humanoid statue? Now this comes from Return of the Jedi. Notice the statue with the folded arms beside the step pyramid structure, right beside it. And here we have a statue with folded arms from the movie Dune. Now this statue is nowhere as near as big as the one on Mars, but where does this concept of a large humanoid figure with folded arms come from? Statue or rock formation? One, the proportions match those of a humanoid form. Two, proportions are very close to the giant Buddha. Three, it defies gravity if it's a rock pile, since the broad part is on the top and the narrow part is at the bottom. And that just doesn't happen naturally. And when you start putting all of this together, you come out with artificial. 4, indications are that the statue is carved out of the cliff, as is the Buddha. 5, the presence of a step pyramid next to the statue confirms it's a religious figure. 6, the head, arms, torso, legs, and actually the feet are clearly visible and in proper proportions one to another for humanoid form. Now, if you compare this to an Egyptian statues, you confirm the proportions and the religious nature of this artifact. 1, the royal headdress typical on most Egyptian statues. You may remember the difference in the head width between the Buddha, which does not have a major headdress, compared to the Martian one, which was wider. If you add the headdress, the width of the Martian statue's head is in perfect proportion to any humanoid head, and that's an incredible fact. 2, the folded arms are identical to many Egyptian statues, which thrust out the elbows, making the bulge in front as well as the arms are folded in the front. And that can be seen very, very clearly in the pictures. Very clearly that the shoulders are thrust up and the arms are folded, and you have that kind of a protrusion in the front. And if you allow for the headdress, why, it's pretty close. The legs and the feet are close together, typical of royal mummies and other statues that are found all over Egypt. And this is kind of an interesting thing for an archaeologist. What's an Egyptian-style statue doing on the planet Mars? Kind of an interesting question. The feet and the legs are very close together, the same way as they are in Egypt. We have this, actually this is a statue we bought of an Egyptian mummy. Conclusions: this is artificial, intelligently designed religious artifact, built for reasons of worship, most likely by entities unknown. We don't know if it represents Ra or Re. Some people claim the name should be pronounced, but the fact that there appears to be a step pyramid beside it is most interesting indeed. And in Volume 2 of Project Redstar, we'll cover the step pyramids and the other structures near this statue. It's an incredible, incredible archaeological site. The next thing we're going to look at are the wall ruins. We dubbed them the wall ruins for lack of a better name, or we're not quite sure exactly what these wall ruins represent. The walls themselves are approximately 50 feet wide in their width, and it's a huge artifact. The overall wall structure, the frontal wall structure, is about 625 to 650 feet long. It sits about 220 feet tall at its high point. You will notice as we close in on this how they step up, like these are huge, huge blocks that this is constructed out of, much like a step pyramid in the way it goes up. The one to the left, as we are looking at the picture, our left, appears to be still more intact than the side to the right, which appears to have fallen off in ruins. Now, a lot of these kinds of walls and whatnot and large blocks were robbed here on Earth to build other structures. And we think maybe that there is a possibility that part of this was robbed to build the step pyramids that are at this site. There are 3 or 4 step pyramids in the immediate area of Tithonia, and that may account as to where and why these walls lie in sort of ruins. These walls meet the criteria, however, for artificial design. It's very, very readily apparent. They form out of basically nowhere. They rise off a very flat surface. They're abrupt. They rise up perfectly flat as a plane. And I don't think there's any question whatsoever that these are artificially made. The only question we have is, what kind of a structure were they? And it was a huge, huge structure, whatever it was. As we go back, you can see how that rises off a flat, plain floor. The floor there is perfectly flat, and all of a sudden you have this vertical wall rising up, and that's one of the features of artificiality. Totally out of place with the ruins around it, totally anomalous to the smooth flow of the terrain, as you can see outside of the city. The evidence of artificiality then, one, the walls are totally anomalous to the surrounding terrain. They rise off a perfectly flat ground area. Two, the walls are very uniform in their thickness. Three, the walls rise and fall in a uniform manner. Four, the walls step up in a uniform rise and fall on both left and right sides. Each side appears to be fairly consistent in its deterioration. Five, the walls also make sharp, repeated 90-degree angles and show flat, even vertical faces. Six, the rise and fall of the walls is in keeping with ancient, huge stone block walls that we find on Earth. Eight, the walls join each other as in all normal wall construction. And nine, all the walls are anomalous to the natural formations that surround them. And this is one of the things you look for. The finding of such walled ruins at this site should be of no surprise, considering the other artifacts that we have seen here. These ancient ruins may have been robbed to build the step pyramids found, or this may be a partially built structure that had either not been completed or was left for reasons unknown. Maybe they had a major earthquake or something. Anyway, conclusions. These wall ruins are obviously of intelligent design. They meet all the parameters of engineered structures as compared to natural anomalies. The repeated angles, flat surfaces, uniform steps, both up and down, prove this artifact was designed and built by entities unknown for reasons unknown. It's one more of the enigmas found at Tithonia. Another one that's coming up here is the Step Pyramid. It's part of an inner city complex that lies in surrounded by an ancient wall structure, a curved wall structure. We're going to examine that wall. Anyway, as you see the ink lift coming in, you can see exactly the Step Pyramid is very, very visible. And it's a fairly large pyramid. The biggest pyramid of the entire group actually lies just inside the city wall structure and is therefore harder, I should say, to see. You can see it plainly enough, but it's a little more difficult to ascertain. But as we get closer in, you can see this step pyramid very, very readily. It's deeper than where the sunlight hits it. Actually, it's a little bit bigger than one might suspect. We haven't shown it as a two-sided step pyramid, although it might very well be four-sided. We're viewing it from a frontal view, and therefore it could well be a four-sided pyramid. If so, the north and the south sides are in fact very, very steep, but it is possible that is an actual four-sided foot or pyramid. It's 300 feet long, 100 feet wide, and it's very typical of pyramids that are found in Mexico and South America. There are also Egyptian-style smaller pyramids on top of structures. In fact, there's a number of them on top of buildings. We're not exactly sure what that signifies, but they're there nonetheless. Here's an animation climbing up this step pyramid. We're quite sure there is a cap for royalty or deity or the king, whoever. That's generally what those are on top of the pyramids. Here is the inner city cluster with the inner city wall that is curved. This is actually a very incredible archaeological site. To find step pyramids of this type on the planet Mars is in itself remarkable. But the question remains, why did they build these kind of structures that we find on Earth? And some of the buildings are extremely high-tech looking. We're going to get into several of those in just a few minutes, but these structures of both ancient and modern design boggle the mind. What is going on Mars that combines all of these? It's like a capsule in time showing us Earth history. Evidence of artificiality: one, the rise and fall is incremental on both sides of the center top shrine. Two, the flat areas after each step up form perfect rectangles. Three, the top of the center forms a perfect rectangle, and the corners are very sharp, 90-degree corners on all of it. Four, the top cap has openings identical to those found in step pyramids in Mexico and South America. Five, it is totally anomalous to the surrounding terrain, rising off a totally flat floor or foundation. Six, the corners are all 90-degree corners and consistent with all engineered structures. Seven, the rise and fall are identical in design on both sides of the center. Eight, the presence of step pyramids in this complex is consistent with the huge statue, apparent shrines, and a presence of what appear to be several sphinx-like structures, which we'll cover in Volume 2. 9, the sudden vertical rise of the flat walls of the pyramids inside another wall area further confirms intelligent design. Conclusions: this structure and its companions meet all the criteria for artificiality and intelligent design. They were built by entities unknown, for reasons unknown, but most likely for religious activities and possible sacrifice. Step pyramids and statues seem to go hand in hand with ritual sacrifice, and we are wondering what that is doing on Mars, and what is the connection between Earth and Mars. Why are our structures so similar to what we're finding there, not only in scale but in shape and size? I mean, it's a tremendous question, very, very serious question, as a matter of fact. Here's another fly around to show you that inner city complex. We've removed all the other buildings, and we omitted all the ground in these animations to focus on the buildings themselves. It's the buildings that prove artificiality, and that's what we're trying to do. Here is a large dome structure, and this is indeed an enigma. And we have no idea what this dome structure actually is, but the more you examine it, the more complex it actually becomes. One of the main evidences for artificiality is it's number one, it's circular, of course. The rise and fall is identical on both sides. the protrusions are equidistant apart, they are of equal width, and they come out the same length. And so we have to ask the question, what in the world is this? And this is not the only dome structure that has been photographed on Mars. There is another one that was photographed. It was a head looking straight down on it, but it's very, very similar to this dome structure here. And I think that this proves conclusively artificial design. Your inner city wall actually ends at this dome. The dome itself appears to be from the ground level all the way up to the top, about 300 feet high. It's about 560 feet wide. This is not a small structure. It is a gigantic structure. And as to its purpose, we have no idea. I mean, we build domes here on Earth, coliseums and sports stadiums and that sort of thing. But as to what it's doing on Mars or what its actual function is, we have no idea. Again, we're going around the inner city area. The inner city wall starts with the dome or ends with the dome, depending on how you want to look at it, and then travels all the way over to a structure that we call the Tesla Power Complex, which we're going to be getting into here shortly. That building, the Tesla Power Complex, proves more than just adds one more proof of artificiality and intelligent design. When we get to that particular structure here that we're just going by right now, you'll see what we mean. But this dome structure is an incredible structure, both high-tech and very functional. Of course, domes are exceedingly strong. They would stand up well to the high winds on Mars. But we have no idea what its actual function is. Evidence of artificiality. One, the dome is totally anomalous to all the surrounding terrain. Two, the dome center is the high point. The rise and fall from each side is equal. Three, the protrusions are equally spaced apart and protrude the same distance. Four, the windows in the foundation appear to be evenly spaced between the protrusions. This is an incredible structure. At first, when you first look at it, you don't notice all the details, but as you study it, they begin to become apparent. 5, there are several entrances to this structure. 6, the inner city wall terminates at this structure, or begins there. It appears to be one of the entrances to it. 7, the top of the dome appears to be radiating light, not reflecting it. And there are other areas here where the light is being radiated. The dome is an artificial structure meeting all the criteria for intelligent design and forced engineering. It was built by entities unknown for reasons unknown. Here's a TV series, 3 Minutes to Impact. Very interesting, the nature of the structures they conceive of for the planet Mars, and this is what this is supposed to be representing. All right, this next thing is the Tesla Power Complex, power station. We think that's what it most likely represents, a power energy station. It could be for pumping water or free electricity or whatever, but this complex is very, very unique, very different. We have never seen anything like it anywhere on Earth other than a few of the things that Nikola Tesla built, and we'll get into that. But it consists actually of 3 main parts. A large arched dome with 2 poles poking out of it that have large balls on the top of each pole and centered on top of each pole. There's a forward ramp entry area that's easily seen, and you can even see the support structures underneath it. And then there is what we call a power station, which is kind of a rectangular area that's got 3 protrusions or silo-like protrusions coming off this flat roof. There's pipes leading into it and out of it that go into structures down below. This is an incredible display of artificiality or intelligent design. I don't see how anyone can get around this particular structure. If they wanted to dismiss everything else, I don't see how one can dismiss this. This is so obvious when you really start to study it that we have here a major anomaly on the planet Mars, and it's clearly an engineered structure. Here are some different views of it. Computer renditions, actually. Stills taken from the animations, but it gives you a good idea of the three main components that comprise this power complex, and that's about the only thing we can call it. It's a power complex. This gives you a good idea of the actual power station, what we call the power station. This shows you the two archways, one leading into the other. Both are supported. And the archway leading up to the primary Tesla arch has three main support columns underneath it that are quite visible in the pictures. Here's a view looking over the roof of the main arch. These poles with the balls on top are huge. Very, very large poles. These are the smaller ball on top is a 35-foot ball. The other one is close to 50 or 60 feet in width. These are huge, huge structures. You can actually see a winding going down from the ball, down the pole like a barber pole, through the roof. There's an opening in the roof. And then you have this pipe leading out of that into this building here, which we simply call the power station for lack of better terminology. The scale of the Tesla dome, what we call a Tesla dome, it's 175 or 170 feet long, it's 150 feet wide, and it's about 100 feet tall at the center point of the arch. The arch is very, very clear. The power station itself is about 150 feet by 75 feet. It's about 75 feet tall. The silos, or whatever those protrusions are 93 to 100 feet, 112 to 120 feet, 75 to 90 feet on the other ones. The pipes with the balls on top, the big one is about 189 to 200 feet tall. It's 50 feet wide on the top, the ball is. The other seems to be about 165 feet. These scales are approximate. They are not exact. We don't claim them to be exact. We're using the scales given to us by the information, the data information on the websites as to scale. This is a Tesla arch, or ball on top of a Tesla tower. This was some years ago that Nikola Tesla was fooling around with this sort of thing, and this is the closest concept we have of explaining what that might be, and it could very well be some sort of a free energy device. Tesla claimed that he could power every house in the country and in the world for that matter with free power, and of course no electric companies are going to want that to happen, so a lot of his engineering and and technical data was taken and stolen and secreted away by the powers that be. And a lot of what people are seeing may well be advanced Tesla technology. Here we're going to do a live trace just to show you how to interpret this picture. This took us a long time actually to figure out, viewing it with negatives and positives and high resolutions, low resolutions, and we're very, very certain that this is the shape of this facility. The arch itself is clearly open. Almost, we feel probably, although we can't see the other side, we feel the archway is probably open all the way through, because you can clearly see the pole coming down through the roof, and you can see into it, and you can see a pathway that actually leads right into the arch itself, probably for maintenance and that sort of thing. But it is an open archway. It's very, very thick. The roof is probably 25, 30 feet thick, close to it in some parts, probably of forced or reinforced concrete. It's an incredible structure when you stop and analyze its size. It actually is not sitting on flat ground. It's sitting on a kind of a hillside. There we're drawing in the secondary arch, the pathway that leads up into the main structure itself. You can clearly see underneath there are support posts under there, and there's a pathway that leads into the bottom area as well. We're tracing in the support posts. I don't know if you can see it totally clearly, but when you get the actual picture, you can see them quite well. And you can see where the roadway comes in and actually splits right about at this point, and the upper one goes into another arch, and that arch is very large. It's a good 90 feet tall, at least, maybe 100 feet tall, and close to 100 feet around. And this roadway or pathway, whatever it is, goes right into it, and then that leads into the area where the statue is and the fallen ruins of that step pyramid. Now we're going to trace in the power station area itself. You can see this pipe. We're drawing a picture right around there, drawing a line around where the pipe protrudes, and it descends into this rectangular flat roof that has the three large protrusions coming out of it. Now, nature does not, she simply does not give us these kinds of facilities. Nature does not do this. This is not a natural artifact, bunch of rocks or something. And this is a very, very anomalous area. It's quite evident on some of the pictures. If you really examine it, you can see all kinds of engineering, forced engineering here on this structure. It's incredible. What's it doing on Mars? And it's a mystery. It's an enigma, just like all the others, actually, until archaeologists or engineers or scientists could get up there and actually take a look. I suppose we would only be guessing and speculating as to what that structure is. There's another view of that structure as we swing around the inner city complex. It forms along with the wall on this end, then it goes all the way around to the large dome and stops. And just an incredible structure. Evidence for artificiality. The arch dome with the poles, one, it's totally different from all the surrounding terrain. The large poles with the huge balls on top, and that doesn't happen in nature. The largest one protrudes through the roof with clear and obvious openings in the roof for it. Continues down to the ground level or the foundational level, and obviously probably goes far deeper than that. B, the pole has visible windings down it, as one might expect in a Tesla power station. See, the pole is uniform on both sides and is widest at the bottom, a clear indication of engineering, because that's how engineering works. The smaller pole sits just in front of the arch and cuts the view of it as it rises above the archway. The pole is bent partway up, and it has a large 35-foot ball sitting dead center on the pole. In fact, both poles, the ball is sitting dead center on those poles. That's another artificial fact. The archway, A, rises and falls evenly front and back, left and right. B, it has a hole to allow the large pole to come through it that is clearly visible. C, the sides of the arch are smooth and uniform as they curve up and around the center. We've colored it as poured concrete, reinforced concrete, but we don't know if that's what it is. D, there is an obvious pathway leading directly into the open arch. And E, there is a huge pipe or tunnel structure coming out of the arch that leads to a building with 3 obvious circular protrusions on the roof. Nature does not provide such engineering whatsoever anywhere. The frontal arch. A, in front of the main arch, is a secondary archway that appears to be a pathway up into the main arch structure. B, the arched pathway is flat and smooth, well defined, with support foundational poles under it to support it. I suppose we're going to be told that nature just figured out that we'd had to have that in order to support this arch. I don't see how anybody can look at this and say natural anomaly, trick of light and shadow. And there is another large pipe that comes out. The power station, rectangular power station, is clearly defined, has 3 towers or protrusions rising off the flat roof of this structure. These towers are clearly cylindrical and different heights. Power station is connected to the inner city wall structure, but it is not a part of it. It's totally different than the wall that butts into it and actually goes around the back side of it. The power station has a large pipe that comes out of the side and into the structure just below it. All of these items together form absolute, incontrovertible evidence of artificiality and intelligent design. To suggest this structure is a natural anomaly would be absurd. It's actually an insult to anyone's intelligence. To suggest that light and shadow are playing tricks would also be absurd. And to claim that the computer enhancement programs are misleading or misreading the raw data would also be absurd and unreasonable, because it's misreading then all kinds of shapes and sizes. Conclusion, this structure meets every single parameter to identify it as artificial and of intelligent design. It was built by entities unknown for reasons unknown, but most likely is an energy station or energy water pumping station of some sort. Now we're going to take a look at the inner city wall. This is a fascinating artifact. It's in ruins, evidently. We don't know how old it is, but there is a wall structure there that is very, very unique. In fact, it looks as though they've actually carved out of it and made some sort of buildings out of it. As you will see when we get a little closer in, you can see where it flattens out. It's almost like there are several big buildings that were made out of this. Wall is probably 75 feet wide. It's quite tall in some areas as well, probably well over 100 feet tall. And you can see some very, very peculiar flattened areas which appear to have windows in them, as we have drawn for you in this sketch. Some of these things are much easier to see in the actual photograph. Here we have the computer animation of just the wall with the 2 structures, the dome and the power station. And you will notice at the curved point that it appears as though there may be some sort of a building built within this structure. It's a fascinating artifact. Very, very fascinating. As to what it actually is made of, we don't know. It may have been huge rocks. It does have the appearance that this was built out of huge rocks like the old wall ruins. And there appear to be some lights embedded in it. Evidence of artificiality, although clearly in ruins, the main part of this wall is still intact, is totally different than all the surrounding terrain. 2, it rises vertically from a flat or sloping surface abruptly and with absolutely no warning whatsoever. 3, the wall is smooth on its vertical face. These are all signs of artificiality. 4, the wall has several arched entry points. The foundation of the step pyramid is clearly visible through the main archway. 5, the wall ends at the power station, wrapping itself around the back of it. The other end stops at the large dome and appears to be an entrance to it. And it's an incredible structure. 7, the wall appears to be built out of large stones. 8, the wall curves around to form a protective shield for the inner city pyramid cluster. In fact, you can see the foundation of the pyramids through the archways. The inner city wall meets all criteria for an artificial structure and intelligent design, built by entities unknown for the obvious reason to protect the inner city structures and form a barrier. The next thing we're going to look at that is amazing with this Tithonia city is the roadway or seawall roadway combination. Depending on how you actually look at this, we favor the fact that this is probably just simply a roadway, but there is a lot of evidence that this was at one time an island in an inland lake or an inland sea area. But as you can see, this roadway looks very much like the Bimini Road stones that were found off the coast of Florida. We have a little clip about that coming up. But this is an amazing, amazing structure. Here we're looking at the eastern side of the city. To give you a little better view, we're going to move in closely. There is a tunnel on the right side of your screen. We're going to point it out here to you. There's a building here. You can see the outline of the building, and there's kind of a silo-like protrusion on top. And you see light coming out of both areas, and that's away from the sunlight. What is light coming out of a tunnel doing there?
In the late 1960s, a startling discovery was made here off the coast of Bimini. A cluster of huge submerged stones in the form of a road. These stones, ranging in size from 1 to 10 tons, appear to have been fitted together by man and has convinced believers that this was part of Atlantis. The Atlantis legend dates back over 11,000 years and concerns a magnificent island empire in the Atlantic. It was described as a civilization unequaled before or since. It supposedly disappeared beneath the surface in a matter of hours, leaving not a trace behind. There are also those who believe that there may be giant power crystals deep in the earth here. They supposedly help guide UFOs from other worlds and might be the source that affects compasses on both ships and airplanes in the Bermuda Triangle.
Can see why some people would think that that was man-made.
They believe that this is Atlantis, that this is one of the first signs where Atlantis is beginning to show itself, and they believe that over a period of time that more and more and more of the civilization will be able to be seen.
I guess if you believe in that, you can see that road. Some of those edges are pretty straight, but kind of not quite enough to convince the skeptic.
It's hard to prove one way or the other, and it's not enough to change anyone's mind one way or the other.
Evidence for artificiality. The roadway is totally different than all surrounding terrain. It appears to be made of large flat stones laid side by side, as was found in the Bimini Road off the coast of Florida. 3, the primary road begins at a tunnel entrance on the east side and ends beyond the mining building. It actually goes right around the mining building, goes through the flying buttresses, and then it sneaks around behind. There are branches off the main roadway that lead directly to structures or into archways. 5, it is possible that this also served as a possible seawall, as it appears water was once present at this site. 6, there are other roadways that lead to the northern colony. They aren't very visible, but they are actually there. We're going to cover those in Volume 2. Conclusion: the roadway fulfills all the parameters for an artificial structure, clearly designed to enable entrance to a number of tunnels and surface structures built by entities unknown for the purposes of access and protection from possible water erosion.
You can't see it from here, but there is life on the third planet from the sun. The industrious bipeds, who are the dominant life form, have yet to visit their neighboring worlds. So it was with some excitement that one of their high commanders announced evidence of life on another planet.
If this discovery is confirmed, it will surely be one of the most stunning insights into our universe that science has ever uncovered. Its implications are as far-reaching and awe-inspiring as can be imagined. Even as it promises answers to some of our oldest questions, it poses still others even more fundamental.
Presidential press conferences are usually reserved for matters of politics or issues of national security. This was definitely not business as usual. Nor was this. Reporters and TV crews from all over the world turning out for a science briefing.
What we want to do is carefully reflect on what we...
One question they all had was, and is, a simple one, and obvious perhaps. Is there really life on Mars?
Well, the answer is yes. We've shown you incontrovertible evidence, evidence never seen before, evidence direct from NASA's satellite photographs. There is, or there was, intelligent life on Mars. I think that fact should be laid to rest forever now. Not just life, but intelligent life. Not just some rocks or hills that look like a face or a pyramid, but rather an entire cluster of buildings engineered for a purpose, under a planned community. It's obvious this research in Tithonia changes everything we thought we knew about our ancient past, for here on Mars, our structures, they're a phantom shadow of structures found in our ancient past. What are they doing on Mars? This discovery will rock the foundations of all the sciences, but especially those of archaeology, anthropology, astronomy, and cosmology. We are not alone. Here is the live download that we did.